everyone, welcome back to That Heathen Bastard. And we are here to discuss more talking points. Remember, this is not the news, this is a platform for little talking points. So, into the interest of this platform, I wanted to introduce a new possible idea for you all. It's an interesting idea I've been thinking about, and I'm going to develop it more in the future. And no, this is not voter influence. So don't panic. This is just an idea I had about something I like to call a voting corps. Now, before I expand on that, I want to address a few things. Now, there is the phenomenon, of course, of low information voting. The idea that essentially there's just a lot of very low information people out there that are very useful to the powerful people in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere in the country. And these individuals, generally speaking, are useful idiots. They don't really have access to a lot of information. They don't particularly want to research the candidates. They're not hot on the issues. They're not particularly political. They're just, people who want to get through their day. They're choosing the path of least resistance. They vote oftentimes for arbitrary reasons. I mean, my own father literally votes for people based on things like, oh, we want a balanced team of men and women. As though that were somehow contingent on good voting. So he'll give you some musing on how men and women balance each other out. And while that may be true, that's really not appropriate grounds for voting. Right? Low information voters who don't really know the candidates that well. Whenever I vote, I always make sure to research the candidates and their talking points. It's relatively easy. There's tons of spaces online where you can look up the person and the candidates, listen to quotes from the candidates. There's all kinds of ways you can do that. But most people don't want to put in the time. I think that's irresponsible. Voting is not just a right or a privilege. It's also a responsibility. It's a great responsibility. It's more than just a decision-making process. Democracy is responsibility. But low-information voters can't really act responsibly when they don't really know all the ins and outs, all the particulars that well. And of course, with that being said, I would say most voters are probably very low-information voters. I mean, not to brag, but I am a rare fish in a number of ways. You're not going to find too many of me in the same river. Of course, that's mostly just because I have a tendency to be a very defiant individual wanting to walk to my own song. That's just kind of how I am. But generally speaking, these low-information voters are being taken for a ride by scummy politicians. Scummy, scum-sucking pieces of crap in Washington, D.C., and sometimes, if you really pay attention to them, they're so fucking obvious. My God. That whole debacle, briefly, with Bernie Sanders, where he goes from saying millionaires and billionaires are the problem to just saying billionaires are the problem. Why did he exclude millionaires from that talking point later? Then you look at Bernie's net worth later on, and you're like, oh, because he's a millionaire now. See what I mean? That's the kind of obvious man behind the curtain sort of thing that exposes the scummy politicians. Or Joe Biden telling Charlemagne the God, if you don't know you're supposed to vote for me, then you're not black. And saying just straight up racist bullshit, which he's been saying for most of his life. Right? Biden's a flip-flopper and a racist. Bernie's a flip-flopper and an idiot. And honestly, I don't know which is worse, being racist or being an idiot. Although in my experience actually talking with racists, I'd say that there's a lot of intersection between the two. I could easily associate racism with blatant naked stupidity. They're really not that smart, especially those of the white nationalist bent. I've spoken to them before. They're a different breed, wow. But I'm getting off topic here. Suffice to say, some of them I could call Lenny. I could nickname them Lenny. Like of Mice and Men. You get the idea. They make Alex Jones look cute. But suffice to say, there's always going to be scummy politicians taking people for a ride and manipulating to get their way to the top. In a world of politics, there's millions of Sheev Palpatines and a tiny, tiny handful of Padmes. Not nearly enough. Most of them are going to be Palpatines. Sorry, I am a big prequel fan. Take that as you will. Bottom line is, it is necessary and responsible for research during voting. You have to be responsible. You have to research the topics before you vote. This is extremely important. And as I've said, there's plenty of websites online. You can typically just enter the name of the politician and go down the sources. And there should be one or two places where interview spaces are available. It's easy enough to do on just a general search on DuckDuckGo. Or Google. Pick your poison. But ultimately, it's really just laziness from what I've seen from people. It is laziness. And I would like to see a statistic in the future showing how many low information voters there really are. Because I think that's very disturbing. In that context of a low information voter, someone who's easily usable, irresponsible, generally easy to wrap around your little finger. Because you're a Palpatine. You're an Adolf Hitler. You're a scam fake populist who's really in it for yourself by pretending to be a real populist. And you're always taking people for a ride in the classic, gangster movie sort of language, stringing them along. When it comes down, you have to vote, research the people you're voting on. You must. And this is where I kind of got the idea for a voting corps, or a voter corps. Basically, a voting corps is a research corps, right? It is a corps of researchers, of independent researchers, not paid, not assigned, not affiliated with any known group. Just independent researchers working together to find publicly available information on the candidates and just amplifying that signal, right? Just putting it out there so that everybody knows who these people really are. Looking up net worth, looking up quotes, looking up history, looking up policy, using basic knowledge of economics and other issues in order to paint a more accurate picture of the politicians, because they're not going to present themselves to you in a truly honest way. Not even. They're gonna paint themselves to you as these magical fairies that can do no wrong. They always will. And even though I supported Donald Trump back in the day, very reluctantly supported Donald Trump, because honestly, the man made me nervous with how insanely provocative he is. Right? He put a lot of things at risk with his provocativeness. But even when I supported him, I knew that to some level he'd be presenting himself as the magical fairy that can do no wrong. All of these powerful people would do. It's what they all do. They're no less morally egregious than you or I. They're just as capable of evil, if not more. But they're never going to tell you that, which is why you really need to look them up, look for quotes, look for history, look for net worth, look for, you name it. Anything that could potentially affect their candidacy even in a small way. That's why the idea of a research corps or a voting corps, gathering information and then sharing that, not for voter influence, but in between voting seasons, you would have a website and maybe some flyers. And I suppose, in a way, this could be misrepresented as a kind of doxing, and possibly could stray into doxing, which is why I would say the voter corps should avoid using any information like, say, a personal street address, right? Anything really sensitive. Just general topical information. Interviews, documentaries, quotes, something that time forgot, something that fell into a memory hole would be a high priority, I would think. And then once they got that, they would essentially publicize and spread the information publicly anywhere and everywhere. It would be on social media accounts. It would be on websites. You might even want to put it on a billboard. You might want to have a billboard that said, in year X, Bernie Sanders said X. in year X, he then said X on like a big billboard. And I think that would really kind of, and you'd have the name of the voting corps at the bottom and say it would be like South Atlanta Voting Corps or North Seattle Voting Corps, something like that. And you put it on billboards, put it on websites, maybe even get on the news to do an interview. Just independent researchers researching the candidates to basically cure the ill of low information voting. It's an idea that I'm thinking on expanding on. It's a neat idea, but it's far from working. But ultimately, it's just about informing voters. We're obviously going to have to avoid doing anything like, say, going to a polling place and having a table with donuts and saying, donuts for Ron Paul. Donuts for Ron Paul, everybody. If you vote for Ron Paul, you get a donut. Like, no. Nothing like that. Probably stay away from the polling places themselves unless you're going there to vote. Probably more like, say, maybe going to a school or a public gathering place and just handing out some leaflets saying, read this and know the truth. You know? Something like that. Something that would avoid voter influence laws and just be teaching people the truth. There's something wrong with teaching people the truth. If you're living in a country where teaching the truth is illegal, bitch, you need to move. That is not any kind of place you need to be living in. And such places, you don't have to fight it because they're going to self-destruct eventually anyway. They typically do. These tyrannies tend not to last very long. Of course, they do get replaced by other tyrannies, which are arguably worse or just as bad as the one before it. But ultimately, that's sort of the idea that I had, is, independent researchers supporting a core, educating low-information voters, and keeping people apprised of the real situation. You'd have to be very busy. It couldn't be more than just a hobby. It would have to be very dedicated. So it's an interesting idea to expand upon, and I think it's a generally good idea. I just wanted to share this concept with you because what I'm doing more or less is a kind of political philosophy, where I'm joining my philosophy and politics together. Right? That's sort of where I'm starting this platform. Just getting attention, because I'm very passionate about this sort of stuff. And I'm so passionate to the point where some machoistic idiot's like, oh man, you sound like a snowflake. Yeah, you sound like a sociopath with no emotions and a small amygdala. Here's a fun fact for you. Men have emotions. And it is perfectly normal to express them. Then unless, of course, you happen to be a macho idiot. And you're basically a sociopath. Anyway, with that being said, there will be a link in the description down below to my books. Please buy, download, and read them. And as always, tschüss. Peace.